Well, hello everyone, and welcome to episode 40 of the Zwift Power Up Cycling Podcast. Kind of hard to believe, actually. We've done 40 episodes. I think we're going to have to celebrate in some way with our 50th. We're not there yet, 10 more to go. But here today with the two boys from the Southern Hemisphere, Greg and Kev. How are you? How are you both doing?
Hey Matt, hey Kev, good morning from New Zealand. Yeah, happy to be back.
Yeah, hi guys, good morning. Yeah, like Greg said, great to be back, and let's smash out another podcast.
So chaps, as the Zwift podcast family grows, obviously with Kristen getting involved as well, and Danny a little bit as well, I guess we don't chat too often, do we? The originals. But yeah, what's news in your life?
Yeah, busy time of the year. Obviously getting riders prepared for the season ahead. Yeah, for me personally, some big decisions in regards to where I'd be next year in terms of teams and riders working with. So I've made a decision to work with personal riders and not base myself with a team. A hard conversation to have because, as we were saying off air a moment ago, this sport, it's a very selfish sport for the riders and the staff involved, a lot of time away from home and so on. So for me, I think it's a year to have a bit more time at home with the family. Still coach riders at World Tour level, but spend some more time by the beach here in Australia.
Yeah, I guess that's one thing that people from the outside, you think it's all glitz and glamour, but actually it's professional sport. It's ruthless at all levels, from the Swanyos, everyone, and and to do a proper world-class job in a world-class cycling team at the pointy end of it. It's you've got to be committed, haven't you? It's not something you can do half-heartedly. So big move, Kev.
Yeah, well, look, I guess Matt and Greg would know this as well. The comment I can make, as I said, it's a very selfish sport. It's also, the rewards are huge.
Yeah,
and it is a very positive environment, but also the risk is very big as well. Yeah, it does take its toll, and yeah, for me, and with our topic today being on mental health as well, yes, it's a year for me to look after myself.
Good decision. It's being an athlete myself, a former athlete, I was just going to reflect on the highs and the lows. They are massive. They really are. From winning a race to a DNF as an athlete, it's a roller coaster. And then the funny thing is, you're on edge quite a lot of the time. You're very susceptible to these emotions. But the strange thing is, when you retire, or when I retired, and I know a lot of athletes like this, you actually miss that roller coaster. Your life becomes like plain sailing. There's no massive highs. There's no, you don't get super excited about something or super upset about something. It's just, life's pretty straightforward, pretty simple compared to the elite level at sport. Well, that's what I've found, and I do miss the massive highs and the massive lows because I lived my life that way for so many years. So it's interesting. You take a step back, and yeah, it's nice. There's actually a nice release valve, a nice pressure release, and you actually start to enjoy sanity, like real life. You know
what, Greg? You summed it up really well then, because it is like a really emotional roller coaster. And with my decision to just work with personal athletes and remove myself from teams for next year, my thought was, I just want plain sailing for a year. I just need some stability. Yeah, without it's very stressful, which it should be because it's the highest part of the sport. But yeah, the words you said there, like in taking, just a flatter road in some ways, and less stress. That was my goal in making this decision. And you described it really well then.
It's funny that the lifestyle you described there, Greg, about no highs, no lows, no stress, kind of plain sailing. A lot of people would give their right arm for that kind of lifestyle. But yeah, as I say, sports people are funny folk, and those highs and lows, sometimes that's what we crave.
Oh, they're addictive, 100% addictive. Don't get me wrong. Okay, I'm probably being a bit naive there. I'm sure at the high end of business, you're going to have some massive pressure deals to make and seal, and then you blow a deal or something. Obviously I don't live in the business world, but that's the elite end of the business world. That's the elite end of sport. It's like sometimes you do need to take a step back and just relax and just plain sailing. It's enjoyable.
Yeah, good point. Well, on the weekend, chaps, I've entered a competitive event I'll give you one guess what it is, and it's not cycling.
You're not doing a marathon, are you?
Not a marathon.
Rowing.
Oh, rowing. Well done. Yes. I just twigged. You've seen my Instagram, haven't you?
Are you on Instagram, are you?
Oh, no. I'd forget about that. So, yeah, doing the Welsh Relay Rowing Championships. 3 kilometres, team of 4. Basically 15 seconds, row, big yank, and then jump off and swap. Keep rotating for 3K.
15-second efforts.
Yeah, it's horrible. Absolutely horrible.
So a total of 3K or 3K each?
No, total of 3K. So it's literally about an 8-minute effort, split into 15 seconds on, 45 seconds off, which sounds crazy because, obviously when you're getting on and off, your feet are strapped in, all that time jumping off, you think, well, the flywheel's going to spin down so much. But actually, when you get the technique semi-dialed, we're not dialed by any stretch of the imagination, but once you get a bit of practice in, surprising how quickly you can throw yourself off a Concept 2. Can
I ask why?
The crack, mate. The crack. So basically, a mate of mine is a good rower. He's doing an individual event, and we ended up just cobbling together a team and to give it a crack. There's 17 teams entered, so I'll let you know how we get on.
So this is the Welsh Team Rowing Relay Championship.
Absolutely, yeah.
Huge
Absolutely.
event. Huge.
It's a huge event. 17 of Wales's finest rowing teams going head to head.
Is that why you were doing those bicep curls in the hotel room last time I roomed with you at the last camp we were at, mate? Were you in preparation?
Absolutely, mate. We were having
Remember when I busted you doing bicep curls?
Hey, Greg, what happens in our bedroom stays in our bedroom, right?
Oh, yeah. Sorry, man.
Between me and you.
Yeah, whoops.
All right, okay, moving on.
Anyway, moving on. So, little Zwift update. Again, taken from Zwift Insider. Fantastic source of Zwift knowledge. I know I've been a little bit frustrated in the past at the length of a lead-in sometimes. And even in a race, you've chosen a 30k race, and you think, right, that might be 40 minutes, but you've got an extra 5k lead-in, which you didn't factor in. And I don't know, a lot of Zwifters have kind of had this frustration as well. Now, there's a nice page about this on the Zwift Insider website, so check it out if you're into all that and spawn points and the lot. But the latest news is that the spawn points and the lead-ins are now marked on the routes as you log into Zwift. So that's quite handy. And for me, up the Zwift, the Road to Sky route, you basically hit that climb quicker as the spawn point has moved closer. So if you're after your Tron bike, then Road to Sky is now being it's a better route to choose because you basically get to the climb a bit quicker. Pretty cool point. And then other Zwift news, I guess. Zwift Academy, that's a big point at the moment, Kev. What's the inside scoop there?
Yeah, Zwift Academy, once again, huge talent ID process. And we're down to the finals now. So the final 3 in both the men's and women's have been released. And those 6 athletes are off to their respective training camps in Spain in December. And interestingly, out of those 6, half of those are Kiwis, Greg. So obviously doing very well over there in New Zealand, training hard and producing some good bike riders there.
Well, we have this ride on Thursday nights that I lead, and it's called the Kiwi Crew Ride. We get up to 200 people now Thursday night, and Samara Shepherd, she's won the final. She's on there most weeks. She's there, like she just loves it. Pithy himself, he's there. He turns up. He's and his younger brother, Lawrence Pithy, he's the double junior world champion, and just in the weekend won the national criterium champ. So he's another rock star in the future. Yeah, and then Drew Christensen, I just went and spoke at his high school prize giving. He actually got a mention for making the finals of the Zwift Academy. So it's a big thing, the Zwift Academy here in New Zealand.
Oh, and it's just getting bigger every year. From the process, it was something like 60,000 people took up the challenge of Zwift Academy. We've narrowed that down to 10 semi-finalists, and now we're down to 3 finalists. So to be part of running a worldwide talent identification program, for me, it's hugely enjoyable. And then to see how these athletes then fare during the year. Like we've followed Ella Harris this year. She's done really well with Canyon Shram. And from these 6 athletes we have for this season, to see where they go next year, it's hugely exciting. Looking forward to the training camps in Spain. I'm heading over to Spain in December, and we'll announce the winners there and then follow their progress next year. So if you weren't part of Swift Academy this year, definitely give it a go next year. And it really is... anything's possible. You can go from the ergo in your garage to a professional contract the following season, so it can be done.
As a tool for talent identification, obviously Zwift Academy is leading, but there's going to be, fast forward a couple of years, there's going to be a lot of national governing bodies using Zwift, I would have thought, to do just that, because it's you're able to harvest all that data remotely. Fantastic tool.
Well, that is the idea, Matt, to develop Zwift Academy to help either national federations or regional academies in their talent ID. Like for me personally, years ago, I was a coach with the local academy here, and I'd run talent ID programs, and you'd get 30, 40 school-age children into the program. But then to be able to run one with 60,000, it's the ultimate talent ID program. So we can then now pair it back to run smaller programs and make it more efficient and better as well. And the whole idea is to identify the talent out there and then also nurture that talent as well. So the good thing about Zwift Academy, their support doesn't end when they win the academy. They then get continued support for the next season after that as well. So they do everything right by the athlete.
And you think about logistically and financially what it costs a governing body at the minute. So going back a couple of years in GB, you would have, it would be announced in a particular school, like we're going to talent ID or particular area, and anyone would be invited to come and have a go, jump on bikes, and you'd have mountain bikes there to first off ride around a field, and you get kind of timed to filter out those who show any sort of talent. And then you're jumping on a static bike, an ergo of some sort, maybe a watt bike or a turbo and all this. And then there's kind of a residential camp, all this to kind of glean a couple of data sets. Whereas, as you say, the amount of data you can harvest from Zwift, it's unbelievable tool. So exciting to see what the future holds. And we're going to unearth some major talents, and who knows when the first world champion would arise, having originated on Zwift.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's going to happen. Just think about where we are in the northern hemisphere anyway, and in the pro season. It's kind of winter, isn't it? And I'm interested, Greg. This is obviously winter training starting now for the pros, isn't it? And as a pro, what did this time of year look like for you? I mean, it's kind of just base miles, right? Just steady riding.
Yeah, it's quite funny. I was just writing the programs last week for a few of the athletes, and the key to it is progression. Because what you have to remember, you've had probably 3 or 4 weeks of, rest, recovery. Maybe some gym work, maybe some hiking. I don't know how you keep. It's up to you how you want to keep fit for your month off the bike, basically. But then you just sort of progressively build the hours each week. So the first week might only be 12, then you might move on to 15, then you might move on to 20, and then if you're doing 20 to 25 hours after 4 or 5 weeks of getting back into it, you're actually you're starting to find good form again. So you just don't want to load up with a lot of intervals to begin with. Just concentrate on your base kilometers. What I like to do with the athletes is sort of work out the fundamentals of what creates power. So if you take power, wattage, and it's torque times RPM, So what we do is, and I think I spoke with Kev about this one time, is wattage is torque. So your really low cadence work, doesn't have to be super high intensity, doesn't have to be super lot of power, but just quite high torque, so really low RPM. And then to finish your ride off with just some RPM work, at 100 cadence, 100 plus, and in the last hour. And those two components, if you add them together later on at the end of your training block, that's how you produce wattage. So we fundamentally work on those two components in the early beginning of your season. So it's basically the beginning of the season there. November 1, everyone sort of switches their mindset on again to, right, let's start the season. And that's sort of the two core components that we look at.
Yeah, I mean, it's a fantastic time of year to ride with pros. I mean, I was out in Monaco first week of November. Absolute perfect time being an unfit person to ride with, basically out there with my brother and a few boys. And his first week back, it was amazing how they're just so relaxed. Kind of, as long as they're riding their bike,
yes,
didn't matter. Have a coffee stop, maybe 2 coffee stops. Oh, it looks a bit wet today. Have a day off. Yeah, doing a bunch of gym work. Pretty cool. We mentioned the locating stuff. It's some of these locations where those pros live, surrounded by 30, 40-minute climbs, it enables you to do that kind of strength endurance work so easily. You just know you hit this long climb, stick it in a nice big gear, get that cadence nice and low, and without thinking about it, you've done a big chunk of strength work.
Absolutely. And if you're in a flat land or smaller climbs, you've got to do hill reps, and it doesn't sound appealing, hill reps. But, if you just go up a climb and go, okay, do one climb today, but do it at low RPM, you're like, boom, there you've done half an hour of strength work for the day.
But as you mentioned there, Greg, like doing the low cadence strength work, it's ideal. And at this part of the season, when you're unfit, I quite often used to get riders to go and do, you'd call it a block of climbing, but the idea was that because they're so unfit, the climbing is slow and laboured, and they naturally choose the low gear anyway, so they actually get naturally that effect of high crank torque. As you mentioned there, so you're not actually trying to improve their climbing. You go and set them so many meters elevation for the week, and they climb all week. They do it slowly, low heart rate, but the crank torque is high, the cadence is low, so you get that same effect. So, yeah, in some ways, early season is kind of easy, to use that word cautiously.
Mentally easy.
Yeah, mentally easy. Yeah, mentally easy. It's just, getting the hours in, getting back in the routine, and like you say, progressing is the key there.
Movember, chaps. Either of you growing a moustache?
Not this year. No, I have done it before, and I looked like some sort of version of Freddie Mercury. I looked a bit like Freddie Mercury there.
Oh, that's a compliment. That is awesome.
So, it was. No, I just didn't rip into it this year. I've got a bit of a beard going, so I guess I could just chop off the bottom half of my beard and join the cause.
Do it, mate. Do it, and then donate some money, because I'm doing it this year. And
can you grow a beard,
mate? Not beard, it's a tash, mate. I'll send you a bit of fluff.
Put it on the website, mate. Put it on the website.
I'll send you a selfie after this. But on Zwift, guys, I'm sure you've seen there's the Movember 9.9 mission, and did you know over 9.9 million people live with prostate cancer globally? So it obviously primarily affects men, but these men, brothers, fathers, husbands, friends. So the goal, or the mission, should you wish to accept it, and I've accepted it, is to run or ride for basically exercise on Zwift for 9.9 hours. Basically, you got to do 10 hours of exercise. So you've got to sign up for the event in game, and this is the cool part. When 10,000 people have done 10 hours, Zwift are going to donate $25,000 to the Movember charity, and you unlock a cool Movember kit in game. So that is why I'm going to moustache.
Yeah, good man. Absolutely. That's pretty cool, isn't it?
And what does Danny think of this, Matt?
Well, I put it this way. If it's not shaved off on the 1st of December, I think she'll be filing for divorce. Yeah, not a fan. So yeah, I'll be shaving it off pretty soon after. But we obviously got the feature chat. Kev, you mentioned it at the start. This is, again, the topic for today is about mental health. So our feature chat is with Dr. David Spindler, a good friend of yours from Australia, Kev, and also ex-professional cyclist Pete Kennaugh, who's a lifelong friend of mine. Now, we talk about mental health, and David worked with a number of riders, including Pete, Rowan Dennis, who we mentioned in the interview, and others. And mental health is kind of an area that I'd say I have no real experience in. And for me, listening to the chat with David and Pete was insightful. And this was recorded at the World Championships in Harrogate this year. And just a word before we play the recording to say that if you are suffering with mental health problems, talk up, speak with someone that you trust, and get some proper advice. And depending on where you are listening from in the world will depend on where you go for that support. But I think the message is don't suffer in silence, and speak up, talk to someone. There's always someone there that will listen and help. But I think the key thing is, mental health is not, in this chat, it's not necessarily a negative thing. There's lots of positives to be had from getting support and help. So let's jump into the chat and see what you think. Well, we're here for a chat, all things kind of mental health. It's a little bit of a taboo subject, I think, sometimes. But I think it's good to, it's good to talk. So that's what our podcast is going to be about.
Yeah, and we're joined here by Dr. David Spindler and Pete Kennaugh. Thanks for joining us, guys.
Thanks, mate.
Yeah, thank you. Good to be here.
Yeah, as Matt said, it's a bit of a taboo topic in some ways, but it certainly is coming out of its shell. That's the way to put it. Where it's no big deal to talk about feelings, emotions, where we're at in our careers and so on. So we're going to delve into that today. And so, David, you're working with riders, the likes of Rowan Dennis and the World Tour team Dimension Data. Can you let us know, what that role is as a sports psychologist?
So in the team stuff, I work with 12 athletes at Team Dimension Data for Quebecer, and that's in and around performance psychology and mental health, pretty much, and just making sure that the riders know that they're supported not just with their performance, but who they are as humans as well.
And those words, mental health, mean different things to different people, and a lot of people kind of think, mental health is depression, but it's wider and deeper than that.
Oh, most definitely, yeah. So mental health is also happiness. Yeah, so it's across the whole range of the spectrum. So whatever it is, whatever they need, and when it comes to the mind and the, physiologically and psychologically, athletes have to be as healthy as possible. Yeah.
What you're talking about there, depression and mental health. Depression is just one part of mental health. I think mental health is almost about, like you say, being happy, enjoying what you do, and it's almost I would call it the prevention of depression. It's what you do. It's putting stuff in place to help people before they get to that point.
Yeah.
I'd almost say, it's never too late, but you've obviously helped me a lot in the past and stuff. But I think mental health just covers the whole broader spectrum of looking after yourself, who you are, how to get the most out of yourself. And I would say it just involves everyone.
So kind of creating a toolkit, I suppose, of how to deal with all aspects of life is what I propose mental health is, I suppose.
What are the kind of triggers that start, bad mental health and kind of trigger that kind of downward spiral?
Well, that can be just about everything, to be honest. So throughout my practice, I get people who have had issues in regards to growing up. So struggling with where they grew up or how they grew up, all the way through to the stresses of being a professional athlete just in general. So performance pressure, anxiety.
Yeah, I think like what we're talking about today is just so important, because if you look back through the cycling history, and obviously a name that sort of springs to mind is Marco Pantani. And when I spent a lot of time with Matt Rendell this year, who wrote his book, and it's really interesting the stories that you hear about his childhood and his upbringing and how that affected him. And the first thing that came to mind for me was maybe if his career was 20 years later, he'd obviously still be alive now because it'd be 20 years later, but he wouldn't have been in the position he was in the 90s, where no one even really knew what mental health was, and it's like, I think people, they still do today, but I think people back then just dealt with it via alcohol or drugs because it was not talked about.
Yeah, so Pete, I really think what you're saying is fantastic, and you're definitely leading the way in expanding the subject. I was interested to hear your opinion on, is it the team's responsibility to provide this kind of support for you, or is it up to you to find it yourself?
That's a good question. It depends what team you're part of. And then it's also where the question gets interesting is because they might have a psychologist or a psychiatrist, but it doesn't mean it's going to work for you. You might not click with them. You might not trust them. They might not be able to get the best out of you. So ultimately, it's your responsibility. The teams, I would say, could also do a lot more. And then we've chatted about this quite a lot, haven't we, over the last year? But it's about, for sure, there needs to be a change in how teams deal with their riders, 100%. Because if you're not finishing a race in, I don't know, like Mallorca Challenge or an early race in the season in April, May, whenever. Not May, that's not that early, but February. But and it's like, it's kind of, why aren't you finishing a race? We're paying you X amount, you're professionals, like, so why aren't you finish a race? And you're interested in it as well, weren't you? Because if they're paying you X amount, then why aren't they helping you to get the best out of yourself? They've invested in you as a rider. So it doesn't make sense for you or the team to not work together, but it's kind of that whole culture that we live in.
Yeah, so I find it really difficult that athletes get paid based on their performance. but then when their performance doesn't add up to what their expectation is of the team, is it just the athlete's responsibility? So why is it only the accountability of the athlete when it comes to that? So why haven't we, at some stage, well, as a performance group, whoever that is, whatever team, to say, okay, this athlete's already a brilliant athlete, otherwise he wouldn't be in the World Tour. But how do we help him to then move forward and get through whatever it is that he is?
Yeah, and you spoke about culture there, Pete. And I guess my experience working with World Tour teams is that if I present to the performance group, we have the budget to employ either a nutritionist or a sports psychologist. It's a real mix now of certain national teams will go for the nutritionist and they don't see the value in the psychologist, and some will go for the psychologist. So it certainly is being more accepted. But it's interesting, you talk about culture. In some teams, the culture isn't quite there yet. But people like yourself are going to make really big inroads in that.
Yeah, and I think this is also where I think this whole sort of talk about culture and teams and riders and whose responsibility it is, it's also a massive contradiction because it falls to the rider as well as the team in some ways. So some riders will just not want to talk about it and put it off. So then therefore it's not really the team's fault. So then it's kind of, and that's where we've got to kind of break this mold, because if the rider's not talking about it because he's embarrassed or he feels soft or whatever, then what can the team do? They could offer him to see a psychiatrist or a psychologist, but then the rider could feel like, oh, when I go to sign my next contract, this isn't going to look great, you know.
You just said then, Pete, about appearing soft. I think that's cycling's such a hard sport, and kind of those the words man up and get on with it, and just they're such damaging words, right?
Oh, most definitely. So it's stronger as being a human being to ask for help.
Yeah.
So it takes more strength to ask for help than to internalize it and sort of keep it to yourself. So it's a strength to say, I'm struggling here, but you have to allow yourself to be vulnerable to someone that you trust. And it's the trust that needs to be there before that vulnerability needs to be let out. And that's very difficult if you're employed by a team as well. And you have to build that trust within the athletic group first and then do your work.
So you talk about working with teams there, David. Can you give the listeners just an idea of how someone like yourself provides the service that you do to a team of 27 riders or thereabouts?
So first of all, I went to a training camp in November before the season started, and under no circumstances did I do any structured interviews, and made sure that all I wanted to do was make sure that those people understood that I was a human being as well, and I was vulnerable and I had my own insecurities and there was faults in me. So then when they realised I wasn't a just plain textbook type of person, when I did do some interviews post that training camp, they opened up to me a little bit more, and then that trust is then built when you go to races and sit down with them and just have a decent conversation. How's your family? It's not just about performance psychology. It's actually about how's your partner? How's your children? How's your mum? How's your dad? We've got, I have athletes that their parents are struggling. Whatever it is, their mum could have a massive health issue, and that actually affects performance. And if you don't have somebody to be vulnerable to, then who do they express that to? Performance goes down.
I actually think that's key, because I think 9 times out of 10, when you're on the bike and performance-wise, it's usually something in the background, not to do with sport-related stuff. It's usually what's going on in your normal life or outside of cycling, which is the issue to why you can't perform. It's not. So teams might employ a sports psychologist to get the best out of their athletes, and they're like, okay, how are you going to approach a race tomorrow? What kind of mindset and mentality are you going to approach? And it's like, well, how can I approach a race tomorrow when all this is going on that I can't deal with? And then that just becomes totally irrelevant. Do you know what I mean?
You end up vortexing yourself too, because you go around, if you don't have somebody to talk to, it just gets worse and worse and worse in your own head.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden this mountain becomes, the mountains, it was a molehill at the start.
So a question to both of you, is the benefit in David being at the races for you, Pete, or is it the benefit for David being in your home environment?
We talked about at the start how it's different for everyone, but for me it'd be home environment completely, because I'd say that's when you're most vulnerable, I'd say. And I'd say it's the same for a lot of riders. When you're at the race, you're so in the zone, and it's kind of everything's so structured and taken care of. You don't really have too much time to ponder your thoughts or even get into that spiral of your mind just wondering about what I'm going to do tomorrow or don't feel like training today. And it's your mind's completely focused. But I'd say at home, that's when you have the chance to sit back, and that's when you can talk about depression. That's when you can start having those negative thoughts, I guess, because you have just time on your hands.
Yeah.
People become regimented as well. So when they go to a race, they know that 9:30 is breakfast. If it's not a race day, training's this time to this time, and then lunch is this time. You're accounted for the majority of the day. When they're at home, and if there is issues in not performance issues, then it's not so regimented. A lot of the time they get up and go, oh, hang on a minute, my son's sick, so that means I can't go training for another 45 minutes, which then brings, this.
Also, when you're at home, you might not feel like training.
Yep.
When you're at home, you don't have to.
Yeah.
What you're talking on there, how it's so like almost institutionalized. And what's even more important is then post-career, because then you lose everything. It's not just the races, you lose everything. So how do you go from that regimented environment, almost like the army, where you can have a way of like processing emotions and almost like blocking them out, because, okay, it's like the world's watching, it's pouring down with rain. Everyone's suffering. No one wants to be there. You've got these emotions in your head, and all you got to do is just put them to one side and pretend they're not there. But then if you've done that your whole life, how do you learn to then process normal emotions? Like anything, like your argument with your wife, how do you learn to empathize with her emotions? Or it can literally come down to any kids. And then you have that also from a professional point of view. Everyone has rallied around you your whole life, from when you were traveling to races, your mum and dad, to then when you obviously become a dad and then have a wife. They're all there supporting you, making your life as easy as possible so you can train the next day. Because at the end of the day, like you're the income, so that's another reason why they do it. But then when you stop, and that also stops, and it's like, okay, now you've got to look after the kids as well. And you're like, whoa. And you've got to, and then for me, I really realized, like, not just what my wife Lauren did for me throughout my whole career, but how self-centered I was without even realizing it. Like, what I realized lately is you still like that, but you've got to learn to adjust. And it's like a daily thing constantly.
So can I ask you, again, from my team perspective, at what point does the team's responsibility end?
That's a very good question. I don't think it's an individual team's.
Does it end?
I don't think it's an individual team's responsibility. I don't know whether it's UCI or cycling, like whoever the organisation is, whether it be cycling or whatever, football, basketball, because a rider could ride for 3, 4, 5 different teams throughout their careers. Then you can't really pinpoint a certain team. But then I guess it's not just about organisation and teams. I think it boils down to the rider taking responsibility for himself, which a lot of riders don't do.
Yeah. And do you think if you had had access to someone like David, under 19s, under 23s, would that have had an impact later in your career?
I think it was, for me personally, probably later on, because you spend all those years so enthusiastic. It's like all you've ever dreamed of your whole life, and enthusiasm can take you so far.
Yeah.
And then, like, even now, I've still got so much passion for the bike.
Yeah.
I'm doing like different bits of work now, and I went to ride my bike, I think it was Wednesday for the first time since I've been here, and I jumped on it, haven't not rode it in 4 weeks, and I was like, wow, this is the most normal I've felt in over a month.
You enjoyed
like
it?
Straight away, it was just my safe zone.
Yeah, that's good.
And what was the question?
I was talking about if you had access.
Oh yeah,
to
sorry, yeah. So sorry,
as a junior,
I went off on a tangent
Quick
there.
example here. Went to the World here, and we had a young Colombian guy who we all saw on TV, punctured, was left for dead by the UCI and team cars and so on, and he was on TV in tears, racing down the road. I see a guy like him, and listening to you speak, I wonder if he has access to sports psychologists now, is that going to help him in the future as well?
I mean, he's obviously like very emotionally heightened, so I mean,
Yeah, so he's placed, like we've spoken about in the past, so he's placed a lot of worth on the specific target, which is more than likely his A-level goal for the year, and he's seeing that A-level goal pass him with every car that passes him. So that heightens those emotions. He's also got an adrenal response as well, which is, I really need to get back on the bike. This is what I want to do. This is how I want to do it. And for him, was almost impossible for him not to cry. All the emotions come out because he's seeing his dream, what he thinks is his dream, even though that there's more than likely going to be sort of steps down the way, literally right down the road.
Then that's where you see that from a psychological point of view. You can like break it down so well, because even for me, who's had like issues in the past, it's so easy to see him like that. And we were like yesterday, like, did you see him crying? And it's kind of like, it's so easy just to make a joke out of it. You actually don't know what's really going on in his head, So, but that's just the normal human response. Like you've studied for years to have this sort of the way your brain works.
But also it might not be specifically that. Like, has he placed worth on this because of something else? Like, is there something going on externally to that performance that he's put extra pressure onto himself that's caused that emotional response? Nobody knows unless he has an outlet to let that happen.
Oh, we were speaking over lunch about social media and
Yeah.
impact that can have. And he may have well have seen posts on social media and set expectations of himself, and that's all going to contribute to that. But just touching on the younger riders, some of them are going to find it really hard to contextualise what's going on and admit it to themselves because it's also new to them and ignore. I guess with age, this is a question: do you think with age it becomes easier to acknowledge and admit to yourself you've got a problem and you need help?
I think it takes a special character for that to happen when you don't actually hit rock bottom. I think you have to have some emotional intelligence to realise that I'm struggling here and I'm not at rock bottom, and to go and get somebody. Like, it's very rare that you get somebody brand new to either a clinical psychology practice or a sports psychology practice that comes in and they're on the decline. It's usually when they've been found on a park bench after 6 days, and their partner or someone's brought them in, or they've been institutionalized in a facility that's their first encounter with a clinical or whatever it is.
Yeah, there's so many examples in all sports of athletes that get to that point, isn't there? And like we say, it is a topic that is gaining more acceptance. I'm interested to hear your work with Rowan Dennis, and first of all, congratulations on working with Rowan, 2-time world champion. That's fantastic.
Thank you. This one was special.
Played a big part there. Yeah, working with someone like that. Yeah, what's your role with Rowan? Is it a daily thing, or is it does he make contact with you? How does it work? Let our listeners know how it works with someone like Rowan Dennis.
So Rowan and I have known each other since 2010 or maybe 2011. Rowan will tell you exactly when that is. He's pretty good like that. And he engaged my services around 3 years ago. He had got in contact with one of his friends, Chris Sutton. He used to ride for Team Sky back then, and also worked with Kev and I at Institute of Sports in Australia for a while. But then he rang me and said, "Oh, do you remember me?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I do." And we already had a connection to start with. So he's had some well publicised problems is the wrong word, but some issues in regards to his health in the last few months, particularly around leaving the Tour de France the day before a fairly large objective. And I was the one that picked him up so I drove from where I was staying in Andorra to pick him up after that time trial. It wasn't in a very good way at all.
So just to drop there, so on that drive, you're thinking, okay, I'm going to go in with this plan, or am I going to listen to him first? How does it work?
To be honest, I had no idea what was going on. I got to, I think it was Poe from memory. I got Andrew McQuaid, who's Rowan's manager, had sent me a few messages on that drive, like, we are here. He was accounted for at every stage, every minute of the day, from when he woke up. And so at no stage did he go missing. There's no, that's been brought out in the media, but under no circumstances has he gone missing. It's pretty hard to go missing when you're in full team kit and you're, so from that I got there, and then we had a small meeting just between Rowan, Andrew McQuaid and myself. Tell me what's going on, what's happening. Had a little bit of an inkling because there were some things that were happening externally from performance.
You can see things building.
Some external things that were happening, and depending on when this podcast comes out, they might come out. And so I knew that there was a fairly major issue. I didn't know what was end result and why that end result happened. I do now. And we had a conversation. We made a plan moving forward. We went to see his then whoever was the consulting of his team, who then agreed of the reason why he left the Tour de France. And then I drove him home, and then we made a plan and got his health back to where somewhat reasonable condition. Then I went home.
That plan, does that involve FaceTime, Skype, telephone?
During that time, it was one-on-one. Actually, like, I stayed in his house and spent almost every minute of the day with Rowan. It was a fairly acute situation at that stage.
At that point, is Worlds off the cards? Is he thinking about Worlds? So he leaves the Tour de France. Yeah, is the World Championships in his mind there, or is
cycling wasn't in the mind there
It's
at
where
all.
people miss the boat altogether, isn't it? It's not all about cycling.
So one of the things that from then, It was delete all social media. Let's just go into lockdown and let's actually focus on the health of not only Rowan. He has a little boy, he has a wife, he has parents, his wife has parents, and there's a wider community in and around any athlete and or everyone, every human being that had to be managed to the best of our ability. And at no stage does anyone have to know anything about that.
Yeah.
That's someone else's responsibility to let that out.
Yeah.
And that's the only person that lets that out is the athlete.
Well, I think for Rowan and his team around him, including yourself, to go from that point to world champion is incredible. So, like I say, congratulations. Talking about social media, what is the impact of social media to people like yourself?
I think it's massive, personally. I mean, if you look at what we were just talking about with Rowan, it's like probably that situation just got blown out of proportion, really, didn't it?
Yeah.
It was like there was obviously a disagreement with the team, and he just decided to get off his bike in the biggest bike race in the world. However, it's only just the biggest bike race in the world at the end of the day. Do you know what I mean? That bike race disappears. It's not the end of the world. It's not the end of his world. It's not the end of anyone's world. It's just a bike race.
Also, his health is way more important
And exactly.
than anybody else putting worth on Rowan Dennis's results.
Going back to what you said, social media wise, yeah, I feel healthier when I don't go on it and don't just stay away from it. But then kind of a catch-22 because with sponsors, and especially I think it's less important when you're a bike rider, because as long as you're performing, then that's all that matters salary-wise. When you come out of the sport and people want to see what you're up to, or if you're working with different companies and they put value on how many followers you got, or if you can get their content out there, then it's really important. But I can see like over it and past it, but it's not. If you're in a sort of vulnerable situation, it's not the healthiest place.
Yeah,
But then how are you going to publicise this podcast? You know what I mean?
that's true. But since then, he's systematically brought some pieces back into his consciousness, I suppose. He now has Instagram stuffs back, and I'm not sure whether he'll do Twitter anymore, but there has to be a plan moving forward of what's healthy for that individual.
I guess it comes down to you kind of having control of your social media as opposed to kind of subconsciously checking it.
Yeah.
Yep.
We've all done it. I'm walking down the street and without realising that phone out and I'm scrolling through Instagram.
You're right. We're talking about social media, and again, look, Marcel Kill is another example of a rider that made a big decision to leave the sport, and the first thing he did, got off social media. So, like you say, it's a catch-22 because there is a career in social media. You can make an income out of it, but it also can be very toxic as well.
And I think what's interesting to see at the moment, what's going on, kind of this change in cycling as a sport. And the people who are suffering the most are like, well, me, for example, Marcel Kittel, maybe Rowan, maybe like riders that I don't really want to mention, but all in the same kind of age group where the sport's changed and we went through the change. And now you're seeing juniors who, for them, as a sport, it's normal to put their power files on every day, to be monitored 100% of the time, to, you know, it's just normal for them. And that's why you're seeing them going so well, the improvement, and also they've got access to everything.
Yeah.
And they're just like, they're at that level already, and mentally that's normal, you know. It's turned into swimming or something. Yeah.
Swimming.
No, but like when I was a junior, they'd just go do a climb, 10 minutes, 1 minute on, 1 minute off, go home.
Yeah.
No one ever knew what you did, or even if you did it.
Yeah.
And it's a completely different, technically it's the same sport, but it's completely different mentally.
Yeah, so with that too, we were talking about over lunch. We had Enrico Gasparotto over lunch. We're having a chat with him in regards to the differences between when he was a junior to now, and he was like, riders don't have, they struggle with the feel now because everything's monitored, but also that they're so switched on with all the performance benefits now, and that's why they're moving forward.
I guess if you're part of that transition and kind of going into the new world, like you Pete, overwhelming and just too much going on.
Especially because you fell in love with the sport as it was, and now it's so different in terms of how you've got to live, how you've got to train, everything that goes into it from a monitoring point of view more than anything. So you feel like you just constantly got to perform in training, got to perform in racing, and also the
scope.
Yeah, the season's changed as well. It's every race now for sponsors is important. Don't know. I'd probably say Sky changed that. You know, like if you go from they looked at what they did in the Tour de France and they said, okay, why can't we do that in every other race of the year? So then Tour Down Under, they'd start focusing on Tour Down Under, they'd have their group already selected in October. You'd turn up on the December training camp and they'd have their own program because they were training, instead of having that philosophy where the whole team's doing the same training for the Tour, they had different groups within the team training how you would be in May for the Tour Down Under, but you'd be doing it in October. Exactly. It's like, when do you get a break? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Look, I hear you say that, And I'm thinking, oh, geez, that's me. I'd do that, you know?
Yeah.
Like,
But it's obviously
we had the GC group, the
Yeah.
classics, and the sprinters.
Yeah.
And obviously,
But why wouldn't you do it though? But
because there's pressure on me for the team to perform.
exactly. Yeah.
To keep my job, and I need you to do your job well. It just
Yeah.
the pressure just filters down to everyone, doesn't it?
Yeah, and it's not. And it's not wrong either.
No.
It's just the way the sport is.
Yeah.
Yeah. But the compelling thing from there is that if we don't do our job, there's someone else can come and fill our position so easily. The mechanics and so on we're all so expendable.
Yeah, I think there's actually more accountability when it comes to the actual athletes than there is the support staff. I do, because their worth, an athlete's worth, is directly in the results, where the support staff might get an incremental increase in their wage depending on how well that the team does, where an athlete will get so much more if they win 2 or 3 more, 5, 6, 7 more bike races. So their worth fluctuates a lot more. So therefore, there's a lot more accountability for that, I think, anyway. Rightly or wrongly, that's just the way
I
think
agree with you, but I'd say it differs in each team. But I'd say in general you're right. But then some teams it's way like no accountability for sports directors. Other teams will have a little bit more. Other teams will have not quite as much as the riders, but quite high expectations of how they behave, how they act. But in some teams, there's completely
expectations and accountability are slightly different. That's the way I like.
Okay.
Yeah, do you know what I mean? Like
what you expect and what.
Murky area now. We're going to start.
But that, obviously, I don't want to get fired either.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, so
it's a tough one. Like,
it is. It's true.
A psychologist,
It's a lot of money.
Conversation.
Yeah.
We've all got pressures on us. Yeah, and again, look, I'm sitting here thinking, look, the first guy that goes is the head coach. So if Pete doesn't perform, I would say, gets another chance.
You think?
And I go, that's how I see it. Maybe in some teams.
Yeah, maybe
you're a good head coach.
Yeah,
maybe see it like that.
Yeah. But as the psychological side of it too.
Yeah.
I think it's fair to say that the team that I work for haven't had the most successful of seasons, and from a psychological aspect, is I need to be accountable for that too, and I can do the job to the best of my ability. And still the athletes might not get the results that others are expecting. But yeah, so I'm accountable. I find myself accountable to myself mostly. But yeah, that's kind of my point.
Job. Exactly.
Debatable.
You're right.
Yeah. David, for our listeners at home, they're not professional bike riders. They're holding down a full-time job, family, partner and so on. They obviously enjoy their sport, their riding, commit to it. They feel the pressures that we perhaps feel as well. Do you have any advice for just how do you put this in perspective and implement your training and your life as well?
Well, that's a very individual question too, though. Yeah, it's a massive question.
Give us some tips.
So first and foremost, look after yourself. Like, look after your own mental health. Look after who you are as a person. Everyone has their own insecurities and have their own issues. I'm yet to see anybody who is 100% okay.
How do you do that?
Well, you engage someone to if you're struggling enough, go and find somebody. And if that person's not, if you don't engage with that person the way that you think that you should, find somebody else or ask. So the professional in the relationship should actually say, I'm not the right person for you. This person could be. Yeah. So to get back to Kevin's question is make sure that you are and will try to be as comfortable as you can in your own skin. Make sure that know that you're loved by the ones that are close to you, and make sure that you love those same people and keep those people as close as possible. It's really important that exercise increases mood. So it makes you happier. It creates lots of different great brain chemicals. There's also health benefits as well. But mental health benefits is what we're talking about. Exercise is extremely important, but not at the expense of anything else. Needs to be fairly. You need a stable environment. Anytime you have any resentment across any aspect of life, then that creates the niggles in life in general.
Lovely. David, Pete, thanks for your time. Really insightful, and again, not an easy topic for anyone to talk about. So,
cheers.
Hugely appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Yeah, again, I sort of really want to say, massive thanks. I think it's a topic that needs to be discussed, and I really appreciate you coming in today, Pete, and your expertise there as well, David. So let's pick up again in the future at some point.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
Thank you. It's Dr. David too, mate. You forgot that.
All right, guys. Well, pretty revealing chat, I'd say, with David and Pete there. What are your takeaways?
Well, I really, really enjoyed that, and it resonates pretty well with me, having used sports psychologists for years and years of my athlete career. I just want to quickly say before we discuss it any further, I think what's really important to realise is when you find this person that you open up to and you talk to, it doesn't have to be a sports psychologist. It can be a good mate. It can be your brother. It can be, it's just someone to vent to, someone you trust that you can... And you can actually just talk about things, and it's it can be your wife, your girlfriend. It's so sports psychology or psychology itself is not a complicated science. It's just about opening up and sharing how you're feeling. And I think we're all taught as younger kids, and it's bottle up your feelings, bottle up your emotion. I know sportsmen do it a lot, but it's it can be destructive. It really can.
Yeah, and I also think it highlights the acceptance now of riders reaching out and having sports psychologists as part of their team. And if we go back even 5 years ago, it wasn't really common. And now someone like Dr. David Spindler is out there and he's working with athletes, as many sports psychologists are, and it's the norm now. It's okay to have someone like that in your team, just like you have a nutritionist, a coach. You have a sports psychologist as well. So it does show how our sport has evolved.
What I used to think of it as, and I probably had a sports psychologist for 15 years. I actually did my minor and my degree in sports psychology because I knew how important it was to me in my my athletic career. But what I look at it is it's a toolbox. It enables me to deal with any and every type of stress there is, whether it's the pressure of winning a bike race, or whether it's dealing with losing a bike race, whether it's the celebration of the afterwards. It's a toolbox for your emotions for everyday life. It's your toolbox for emotions. Okay, when this presents itself to me, how do I deal with it? How do I cope with it? Who do I share that problem with? So that's the way I always looked at a psychologist or a sports psychologist, and I found it really, really helpful to the ability to control and accept your emotions and know it's okay to be upset, or know that it's okay to be pissed off, or absolutely stoked, absolutely wrapped, and the tools that you put in place, they worked on this occasion. So it's I think of it like a toolbox.
Yeah, I mean, we're all. Everyone is everything everyone does these days is so visible, and I think it's heightened for celebrities and professional sports people, because social media essentially. I mean, you do something good or bad in the olden days, back when you were riding, Greg. And no, I'm trying to be serious here. Is back in at the start of your career, when television highlights and television coverage of bike races was probably a bit less than it is now. That's the only coverage and insight people get into you as an individual. But now you've got extended TV coverage. You've got obviously all the social media channels, and people can, receive that pressure, and it's 24/7, and not just for professionals as well. It's kind of kids. I think social media is as fantastic as it is. It also has its drawbacks, and that's one thing David mentioned.
No, you did right, and it's like you said. They can see every part of your life, but what's actually happening is the young kids, that they're so successful these days that they're not sheltered from it either. So, and they are kids. They're 22, 21 years of age and being subjected to this. It's like, it's a new world that we're living in compared to when, I was that age, a 19, 18, 19-year-old going to my first Olympic Games. I mean, if it was fully rife in social media, I'll just about give myself a social media ban, because for those reasons, you just don't want to hear the good and the bad. It's like sometimes the good isn't actually that good for you either if you start reading into it. And that's again where you need a good sounding board. If you've got someone to bounce ideas off, chat to, and even a mate. I used to have good mates that would just, put my head back, on my shoulders type thing. If they ever thought that I was getting too big, Hendy's getting too big for himself, mate, they would cut you down to size in no time, And that's fantastic. That's what good mates do.
Yeah. Just then, Greg, you mentioned your first Olympics at 18, 19. That's That's epic. What was that? That was the track, was it?
Yeah, so that was in Atlanta in '96.
Nice.
Exactly, and it was
Wow.
like, and that's when I first started using sports psychology, because it was a big deal, and I was freaking out. But I was already at university studying sports psychology, so that's when I reached out and said, look, I might actually need some help dealing with this, because I'm not even at the games yet, and I'm not overawed by it, but I'm like anxious about it, and I want to be anxious. The only thing I want to be doing is worrying about riding my bike as fast as I can. Let's put some tools in place where that's all I can focus on. And like I want to sort of explain is sports psychology is a good thing. It's not all about when things go bad and how to deal with things when they go bad, and which can then further roller coaster and downward spiral into something worse. You need to think of the good things that can actually come out of it. Like even the simple thing for which is sports psychology, is planning a race day for a time trial, for example, having things written down, and the way you put your shoes on, when you put your shoes on, how you pin your number, just things like this in your brain, like it's a running sheet, a running plan, so that nothing actually really goes on in your mind that shouldn't be going on in your mind. This time of day, this is how you need to be performing, this is how you need to be feeling. So it's just what I just really want to let the listeners know that it's not all about how to cope once things have gone wrong. I really want to stress that point.
Yeah, good point.
Yeah, good point indeed. Good point indeed. All right, guys, I say shout out to Dr. David Spindler and Pete for offering their time and talking with us. Hope you enjoyed that chat with them. Moving on then, chaps. Greg, pressure time for you, my friend. Cycling terminology. And I have purposely gone out my way to find a term that is difficult. So if you can't do it, then, you won't live it down, but...
Now, I've got a confession to make before we start.
Right.
I was doing the Wakey Kiwi ride on Monday morning, and I noticed a couple of Welsh riders on my group ride. So I said...
legends.
Yeah, exactly. And I said, look... Could anyone help me on this ride about some Welsh cycling terminology? Because I said I'm up for the terminology report from, and I'm sure Matt's going to throw something curly at me.
Something curly, mate. This is curly. This is curly Sue. Are you ready, Greg?
Yep, right. I bring it on, brother. Let's have it.
All right, mate. Kev, you might need to give him an hour for this one.
30 seconds is the limit.
All right. Your term, Greg, is Veveresting. Or V-Everesting. Tick, tick, tick.
Mate, is that all you've got? I can absolutely nail that. Okay. Literally, it is climbing 8,888 meters on
God damn it.
Zwift. It is taken from the obvious Everesting, which is out on the road, and you submit your Garmin or your GPS file. This is actually done on the ergo in a Zwift environment, climbing 8,888 meters.
Okay, that's 30 seconds there, Greg. I think you've done pretty well.
Well done, mate. Yeah, very well. Very well. Virtual Everesting. Well done. Oh, I thought I'd catch you out with that one.
No, it's something I've actually, to be honest, it's something I've thought about. I was like, you know what? I wouldn't mind having a crack at that. Now, the thing is,
hard effort.
You have to do it as a hill repeat. You can't.
Yeah.
You have to turn around, go back to the same point.
You've got to do the downs.
And then stop up again. So you can't actually, because what I thought when I first looked at doing it was like, maybe you use a section where, you come down off a downhill and you get 300 meters rolling up the next side of the climb, but you can't actually do it that way. You've got to stop on the bottom of that and then turn around and hook it back straight up again. So
yeah.
And I actually read recently there was a rider that did the what's it, Everesting. Everesting. I can't even say it. Anyway, so instead of doing, you would think that Alpe d'Huez would be the obvious one. He did Box Hill because it was shorter and mentally it was easier to do reps of Box Hill for that.
The guys have done on research on it, and apparently, like this is years ago when Everesting was quite popular, and they reckon a 6 to 7% gradient is the most time efficient, because you can actually still ride at some speed, but you are gaining enough vertical altitude meters.
Yeah, just thinking, what's the calculation there? You're factoring in effort, the power versus speed versus elevation gain.
Well, that's your VAM, isn't it? You want
your
VAM, vertical altitude meters per hour. So it is speed and VAM, yeah. That's the key, because you think, okay, let's just hook up a 12% gradient and then let's just crank out the altitude meters. But the problem is the torque and the stress on your body is so much harder than when you can actually sit down for a little bit on a 6% gradient. You're still getting enough altitude, but you're actually doing a decent amount of speed. So it's there is actually a science to it, believe it or not.
Fancy a little wager here then? Who Everests or V-Everests first out of the three of us?
How long does it take? Isn't it something like
12
hours or so, thereabouts?
Yeah. It can be.
Yeah.
I'm going to safely say I don't think any of us are going to do it.
No, and to be fair, if one of us is going to do it, it's going to be you, Greg. So if you're not confident, I'll just stick to my rowing, and Kev, you can just stick to whatever you do.
I'm going to the beach.
Exactly. Surfing. Yeah, stupid idea.
You've just got to be super. You need a huge aerobic base. There's no way you can get by. I don't believe you can get by on a low aerobic base, which I have at the moment. It
sounds like you're keen, Greg. Let's set a date for this now. Let's talk about.
I have. I've done a lot of research. I've done a lot of research into it.
January 1?
Oh no. Oh no.
Give him a couple of days. The thing is, mate, you're doing all these Thursday workouts, you're leading all those. You must be getting fit now. I see you on Strava doing a couple of weekend rides as well. You'll be in the form of your life soon. You've got to put it to some good use.
Oh well, okay. Well, if we have how many listens? If we have how many listens on this, and how many comments for me to Everest? What's the number? And then I'll commit to it.
Tell you what, retweets on Twitter. I reckon if you tweet right, how many retweets do you need to do it?
No, but I saw Dan Lloyd do something like that, and he said, for how many likes I'll ride that many kilometres, and he got like 1,600 likes. He had to go and ride 1,600k.
50 retweets?
50.
Oh.
Okay.
Yeah, Greg?
Yeah, I'm the deciding party here, aren't I? I'm the one that's going to have to...
Oh, yeah, absolutely. No doubt about that. No doubt about that.
Well, I'd need a support crew, obviously, so you guys might have to do it in a common space, and... because it's a team effort. Like, I can't get off the bike for drinks and whatnot. So you guys would have to be domestiques for me.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Kev, it's only over the water for you. You can nip over and I'll Skype in.
Yeah.
Well, what about we do a meeting? We have a meeting in Long Beach. We'll put it to Zwift.
There's an idea. All right.
There's an idea. A meeting. I'll travel halfway around the world to watch Greg Everest. I'm sold. I'm in.
Righto. If that happens, I'll do it.
All right, cool. And on the topic of Everesting, there's an epic story actually from the community from Ross Duncan. So Ross's brother has always been a keen cyclist and was unfortunately diagnosed with leukemia earlier this year in May. So it was totally out of the blue. Received some bone marrow transplant, which basically wiped him down to zero strength. But now, good news is Ross's brother is rebuilding and he's using Zwift to do so. And Ross and his brother Zwift together and knocking up the longest ride together to date of 7 miles. So 7 miles may not sound a lot to many of you, but given the context, what an achievement. Again, Ross's brother, haven't actually got his name, but he's done 4 rides this week on Zwift. Now, Ross is raising money for charity, and he is Everesting or virtual Everesting 3 times. So he's triple Everesting. And I say he's actually done it. So just over 60 hours of riding time, 27,000 meters of elevation, just over 1,200 kilometers notched up, 1,655 TSS with a normalized power of 153. I know, and a normalized power of 153 watts. So this is the most interesting bit of all for me, is Ross's best 5-minute power was only 8 watts off his all-time best, and that was achieved at the end of a 60-hour effort.
Jeez, that's incredible.
Outrageous. It is incredible, right? It is incredible.
That TSS, that's 16. That's a big week's training. I remember doing. I remember a week in the Giro d'Italia at 2,000 TSS. That's a week in the Giro, and it was a mega hard week. And he's done 1,600 in a day.
Yeah. And if you think about hours, what's a grand tour? Roughly 90 hours.
Yeah.
For the fast guys, it might take me a little longer.
So he's done 60 hours here in one ride. So 2/3, 2 weeks of a Grand Tour in one ride.
Climbing as well.
Climbing, yeah, exactly.
That's
Eye-watering.
incredible. Good on him.
Absolutely amazing.
Good on him. All for charity, supporting his brother, enabled by Zwift. So yeah,
Unbelievable.
Epic. Absolutely epic. So question, guys, we've got one question here from David Santos, and the question reads: Hi, I enjoy the podcast. Thanks a mil. My question is regarding position on the bike. I really struggle to hold one position for any length of time and find myself hopping in and out of the saddle frequently. With this, my power shoots up and drops down a lot, so I figured it's not good. Is there anything wrong with riding in and out of the saddle and changing hand position? If not best practice, what is and how can I improve? Thanks in advance, David Santos.
Yeah, I could kick that one off with a couple of things. Depending on how new you are to cycling, obviously in and out of the saddle is quite common because of, bike seats are not comfortable, and that might be one thing we might look at doing is finding a saddle that suits you, because nowadays there's a lot of variations in saddles. A bike fit may help you. You may find that, your setup, maybe you're too short or too long in your reach. And also, just if you haven't been riding for a whole long time, you may lack that consistent seated power. So getting out of the seat does switch up the muscle groups. It does give you a little change in power. So I think the more you ride, the more you can stay in the one position. But I know myself still, I'm in and out of the saddle. It's a comfort thing, and I don't think there's one rider that sits on a seat for the whole entire ride. There's always, it switches up muscle groups, and it is comfortable to change your hand position. But if it is concerning it, I think my first point of call would be maybe a bike setup, and just make sure that things are, your seat's not too high, your reach isn't too long. I think that might be a good place to start.
What would you guys say is normal for when you're riding indoors on Zwift? How often do you get out of the seat? For me, I would say probably every 7 to 10 minutes I might get out of the seat, stretch a little bit, still pedaling obviously, but not too often. Would that be reasonable for you guys?
Yep. I think you're about bang on there.
Hardly ever. Whereas on the road, kind of a little downhill, if I'm in a group, I'll be out the saddle, just like stretching my back.
Yep.
Just moving around. Whereas obviously on Zwift, you kind of sat in one position, aren't you? So I think it's healthy. I think it's good to stretch a little bit. But I do think if you would kind of design a robot cyclist at the perfect position, they'll probably cycle in the saddle all the time for efficiency. And jumping out the saddle in some way can be regarded as a bit of a negative trait. But you look at like Contador, Christ, he was in and out the saddle all the time, wasn't he? So it's very, very personal. You want to be as steady, smooth, relaxed, composed, and all that good stuff as possible. But stretching your back and that kind of change of position, it's normal. But again, if you're someone, I guess, David, if you're spending half your time in the saddle, half the time out the saddle, then you definitely want to be spending more time in the saddle. And I think on Zwift, as Kev's saying, 7 to 10 minutes, jump out the saddle for a bit of a stretch, about right.
Yeah, as a guide, and also I guess if David could maybe focus on staying seated a little bit longer, aiming for that 7 to 10 minutes out of the saddle, stretching a little bit. And power shouldn't shoot up too much. It'll go up by, say, 20 to 30, 40 watts at the most when you're out of the saddle. Obviously, the gear goes a little bit bigger normally. So if he could sort of aim at that 7 to 10 minutes out of the saddle, stretch a little bit, keep pedaling, the power goes up slightly, but not massively. That should give him some more consistency in his riding.
You mentioned before Contador in and out of the saddle. One thing that's important to note there is the guys that can get out of the saddle a lot without the physiological cost are actually lighter riders. Actually getting up, standing up, weight on your hands and shoulders isn't as much as a bigger cyclist or a bigger guy. So it doesn't cost them a lot of energy to get in and out of the seat, and they do. They keep switching up the slightly different firing pattern of their leg muscles. So it's definitely a weight thing for these climbers that can get in and out of the saddle. It costs them no energy.
Dancing on the pedals, those guys.
Absolutely.
Dancing on the pedals. Yeah, there we go. All right, David. Well, hopefully that gives you some food for thought. But yeah, chaps, good to talk. Get training, Greg, for your Everesting, your Veveresting.
Righto.
Catch up with you on the
I'm
next
on it.
poddy.
Looking forward to it, guys. Yep, and we'll make that happen over in Long Beach, California.
California.
Awesome, guys. Looking forward to it.
All right, ciao for now.
Right on.